Hello, and welcome to Reason. Today is Sunday, February 5th, and this episode is entitled, Apparently There Are Two Teams Right Now Playing a Game Involving the Skin of a Pig, and on the Sabbath, no less. Just one more example of the war on Christianity. I'm Joshua Billingsley, along with Paul Whitmire.
How you doing?
And this podcast is coming to you live from sunny Buffalo, New York. Reason Podcast is a weekly discussion of events, current and historical, from a skeptical, rational, and non-theological perspective. Reason Podcast is brought to you by the Offensive Atheists and the atheist community of Buffalo and Western New York. For further information, please visit our blog and website at wnyatheist.org, or you can email us at reason@wnyatheist.org.
An explanation for the absence of extraterrestrials on Earth is a paper written by Michael H. Hart, and it was published in the from the Advanced Study Program, National Center for Atmospheric Research. It was published in the Journal of the Royal Astronomical Society.
Royal? That sounds very nice.
Yeah, they're fancy, they're British, they're royal. They have that whole thing going for them. This paper, so the topic that Josh and I wanted to talk about this week is aliens. And we kind of picked that mostly because I found this magazine about aliens, and it was great, and it talks about the guy from Blink-182
and Sammy Hagar.
And Sammy Hagar.
Don't forget Sammy Hagar.
I guess what we found out in our research here is that, aliens, we don't really believe in those anymore.
Yeah, that came, it went, the X-Files is over. We don't do that anymore.
Yeah, we really don't. But, nevertheless, people are publishing papers on this stuff. So this paper, An Explanation for the Absence of Extraterrestrials on Earth. Now, the author goes through these 4 points and then comes to this conclusion. I'm going to start with the conclusion first because it's what annoys me the most about this paper.
Okay.
The conclusion of this paper is human beings are alone in the universe. Or at least, according to the tenets of the paper, human beings are alone in the galaxy.
In the galaxy. Well, that's pretty close to being alone in the universe. I mean, the galaxy is really big.
Yeah, well, so is the universe, though.
Well, the universe is incomprehensibly big.
Yes.
The galaxy is comprehensibly big.
Sure. Sort of, I guess.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Well, so, and he comes with these 4 points as to why he's fairly certain that human beings are the only life form, or not the only life form, but animal life on Earth is the only life form that exists in the galaxy. And the first one is what he refers to as a physical explanation. The physical explanation being it would the amount of energy, fuel, all of the things that it would take to traverse the galaxy to go from one planet to another seems as though it would be insurmountable. But he makes certain points like a spaceship traveling at 10% of the speed of light on a one-way trip between here and Sirius, one of the nearest stars, would take 88 years. So he says, this problem isn't trivial, but there are plenty of possible means of dealing with it. We could do things like we could do suspended animation, drugs that might slow down metabolism. We might be able to freeze and revive warm-blooded animals. And furthermore, there's no reason to assume that all intellectual extraterrestrials have the same lifespan or a similar lifespan.
That was going to be my
us.
point. What if we live to be 1,000 years? 88 years? Really not that long. That's just...
No.
That's going to Australia.
No, but bear in mind the point he's making here. He's saying that since it's so easy, it would only take 88 years. Mm-hmm. If they were out there, they should have been here already.
If they chose this direction?
Well, he gets to that.
Okay.
But again, this is also supporting his thesis, which is there can't be life in the galaxy beyond Earth because they would have made contact already.
And I don't mean to interrupt here, and I know we just started the show, and I've got a small tangent.
Sure.
One of my problems is, why do we assume that alien life would be at or on par with us? Whenever we're talking about, a species that's intelligent, they're always at our level or beyond.
Right.
Why isn't it as likely that they're at our level or past? I mean, why aren't they in the Dark Ages?
Yeah, and he doesn't really address that except to refer to whatever he's talking about as intelligent beings from outer space. That's how he characterizes them in the paper. This paper from the Royal Astronomical Society. So he talks about highly speculative methods of overcoming the problem, time dilation, relativistic time dilation effect, and blah, 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 nuclear power, interstellar travel, and he lists the magnitude of energy requirements. He talks about how, you'd need a rocket that could carry 9 times its weight and its own fuel to make the voyage from here to Sirius. Okay, that's fine.
Based upon classical engineering.
Yes. His conclusion on the physical section is that it can be seen that neither the time of travel nor the energy requirements create an insuperable obstacle to space travel. However, in the past, it was sometimes suggested that one or more of the following would make space travel more unreasonably hazardous. Number 1, the effects of cosmic rays. 2, the danger of collisions with meteoroids. 3, the biological effect of prolonged weightlessness. And 4, the unpredictable or unspecified dangers. Sounds a little bit about that, like Donald Rumsfeld there, but okay. He concludes that section by saying that with the success of Apollo and Skylab missions, it appears that none of these hazards is so great as to prohibit space travel. So then he goes to his next explanation, which could be a sociological explanation. And this is, if the physical explanation was annoying, we're treading into some really, really annoying things here, because he states, he hypothesizes, perhaps most advanced civilizations are primarily concerned with spiritual contemplation and have no interest in space exploration.
So he's blaming the Christians.
Yeah, he really is.
Space travel, all the fault of Christianity.
Or
perhaps
most technologically advanced species have destroyed themselves in nuclear warfare.
Which is actually, one of the conclusions that Fermi came to in the Fermi paradox, when he says the reason that, if there's so much intelligent life out there, statistically, they probably destroyed themselves through, nuclear holocaust or whatever.
Or
perhaps
an advanced civilization has set the Earth aside as their version of a natural forest or wildlife preserve.
Also, one of the conclusions they came to, that Fermi came to when he was saying why the Drake equation would not produce aliens.
Right. Again, though, let's go back to his thesis, what he is saying here. He's making these 4 points. The species could have blown themselves up. The species could have made Earth a sanctuary. And the species could be sufficiently spiritualist and not care about traveling to the stars, and so on and so forth. And then he goes on to state in this section that these are unreasonable claims.
Okay.
And so, therefore, they do not exist. As in, the extraterrestrials do not exist. Because his theory is, yes, some of the myriad of extraterrestrial species out there could have blown themselves up in a nuclear holocaust. Some of them could be too busy worshiping the sky god to build planes and stuff like that. But a majority of them, or at least a percentage of them, would engage in interstellar travel.
Right, but that's, again, and this is something that bothers me, is people seem to believe statistics are reality. If that is the case, let's say that either one of those premises is accurate. They're too religious, or they blew themselves up. Why isn't it? Space is really, really big. Isn't it just as likely that the people that could have reached us, or could have reached us by now, have fallen into that trap, and there are others?
Well, we're getting to the third point.
Okay.
Which is temporal explanations.
All right.
Now, this is where I think, if I said the first 2 sections were annoying, this one is just plain flat out wrong. So the author states, even if one rejects the physical and sociological explanations of fact A, which is there are no other species in the galaxies, the possibility exists that the reason there are no extraterrestrials is because none have yet had time to reach us. Right. This is his theory that he's going to refute in this temporal explanation section.
Okay.
So his position is that it would be quite a remarkable coincidence to say that all of the it's a little bit unclear what he's saying, but he's saying if the age of our galaxy is roughly 10 to the 10 years, 10 times 1 to the power of 10 years, to accept the temporal explanation of fact A, which is that there are no extraterrestrials out there, we must hypothesize that it took roughly 5,000 time units and choosing each time unit as 2 times 10 to the 6th years. For the first species to arise in our galaxy which had the inclination and ability to engage in interstellar travel. But B, the second such species, i.e. us, arose less than 1 time unit later. Okay, now that's a bunch of gobbledygook. I'm going to straighten that out.
Fantastic.
Here's what he's saying. He's saying it is unreasonable to assume that human beings arrived out of a linear chain of events from the Big Bang. Now, I'm extrapolating a little bit.
Okay.
But here's what I gather he's saying out of this. It is unreasonable to assume that a clock started when the Big Bang happened, and that we came up on, the 11th hour, the 59th minute of the 11th hour, however, that time scale is, due to a series of events that preceded it. Meaning, he's saying life on Earth sat around not existing for a very long time,
right,
and then spontaneously popped into existence. And it would be unreasonable to assume that life on another planet would pop into existence within the same 2.6 times 10 to the 5th million years. It would be unreasonable to assume that life popped up on another planet at around the same time it popped up on ours.
Well, that's first off, yes, and secondly, no.
I'd say absolutely no.
Well, first off, yes, it is unreasonable. If you're considering planets that were capable of supporting life that are close enough for them to have traveled here.
Sure.
If you've got a small window like that. His statement seems to be saying that, anyone. There are a lot of stars.
Yeah.
A lot of stars. And to say that with any degree of accuracy, you'd have to preface it with, hey, I'm talking out of my ass here.
Well, yeah.
Because that's a load of crap. To say that's serious, that's fine. It does seem somewhat unreasonable. These two stars that are close to each other would happen at approximately the same time. That seems somewhat unreasonable. Sure, I can go with that. There's no evidence to say that it is that it's a no. There's no evidence to say that it's a yes. It's unreasonable to make that assumption. Sure, why not?
Well, my problem with it is this: it doesn't account for the fact that life on Earth came about, as far as we can understand, at a time after the Earth was formed, the Earth cooled, the atmosphere was slightly different. All those things fell like dominoes from the chain reaction of the Big Bang. So
life came out on Earth at the approximate period of time that a planet of our approximate size, of our distance from the sun, blah, 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 blah,
right,
would have had the right circumstances.
Right. It had to cool down at a specific rate. It had to contain the specific minerals. It had to be the specific distance from the sun. Now, okay, so let's talk about a planet that's slightly farther from the sun. It would, it may cool quicker, or something like that. So life could originate more quickly. But again, going back to his time unit is 2 times 10 to the 6th. So that's 2 million, that's 200 million years. It's a huge time unit.
Swath of time.
Yeah. So it is, I think he's incorrect in stating that it's unreasonable that life throughout the galaxy would have popped up around the same amount of time.
Well, it's also assuming that our sun would be approximately the same age in its present form and dimension as the other sun, which is also, a bit of a guess.
Right, but these are all factors to consider, which aren't considered here.
Right.
It's just, it'd be unreasonable to say they all happen at the same time. Well, all the matter came out from the boom.
Does he give any evidence to support the position, or does he simply state it?
He simply states it.
Okay, because I'm fine with that hypothesis. I would hope that if you're the Royal Society, is that what it is?
The Royal Astronomical Society.
Royal Astronomical Society, you'd at least give us a little bit of evidence, a little something, at least to explain your thinking, explain your position a little bit, because you're just talking out of your ass.
Well, it's quite evident in the introduction that this is a bit of a throwaway paper. He begins this paper by talking about how, he meets people at parties, and that there's always
who doesn't?
the discussion, of, is there life on other planets? And because he's an astronomer, people ask him if there's life on other planets. And so this is his treatise on why there's not life on other planets.
Well, I guess if you're just writing a paper for fun.
Sure, but it's published in a primary source journal.
Yeah, that's my problem, and I would have to criticize. Well, people probably don't want to criticize somebody who says there's no aliens because they may get pigeonholed into the misinterpretation that they're saying there are aliens and they're visiting us and they're in Roswell, New Mexico right now.
You don't want to be a crazy alien person.
You don't want to. Yeah, so you don't. You can see it's a little bit of a throwaway paper, and nobody comments on the fact that it's wildly vague and just absolutely just a completely empty thought experiment.
It really is,
full of unsupported claims.
So let's just get to the last point that he addresses here in his theory as to why there are no aliens. Perhaps they have come, is what he titles this section. He states that visitors from space could have arrived here in the fairly recent past, say within the last 50,000 years. Mm-hmm. They did not settle here permanently. There are various interesting archaeological finds which proponents of this hypothesis often suggest are relics of alien visits on Earth.
Yes, I believe I talked about that in an earlier show.
Yes. If it is assumed that extraterrestrials have been able to visit us for a long time, then a sociological theory is required to explain why they stopped coming. And so
maybe they don't like water. Did he see that movie Signs?
Yeah,
they may not like water. They said, there's a crap load of water here. Yeah. Let's just not bother coming back here.
Way too much water.
There's nothing but there's monkey men and water. Let's get out of here.
And so he makes the point that if there are, many, many, many different alien life forms out there, you could make an argument that maybe out of the ones who came, only 50% wouldn't want to come back. Well, it would have to be 90%. Even a number saying that 90% wouldn't want to come back means that 10% would, which would, would be insufficient to explain hypothesis A, saying there is no life on other planets. He's basically saying that the hypothesis that most extraterrestrials wished only to visit but not to colonize is inadequate. You would have to say that all extraterrestrials wished to visit but not to colonize. In order for it to be the case that we don't currently have extraterrestrials on the planet, yet there are extraterrestrials out there.
Yeah, that again is a fairly unsupported claim. I mean, extraterrestrials, and again, we're just talking about our galaxy because otherwise that's just gibberish. That's
right.
Too far. We can't even begin to comprehend what sort of life form could go from one galaxy to the next. I've seen Stargate; they're unreasonable.
Right.
But the fact that you could say that, I mean, how would he have any idea if they had come and they had decided not to stay? 100% of them could have done that if it were one, if it were two.
Yes.
But if they're, considering the vastness of space and the fact that we can't even tell which stars have planets for the most part.
Yeah, we're getting better at that.
We're getting surprisingly better.
Yeah.
But that's like in the last decade.
Yep.
We've started actually really having any kind of a skill where scientists can hang their hat on, I am confident there's a big planet there. Mm-hmm. Until then. So, I mean, if we're able to go to Mars, in the next decade or so, we send a ship to Mars. We realize how easy it is. We figure it out. We get some raw materials from Mars and then start, hopping out. Could be 100 years before we could go to other galaxies or other solar systems.
Yeah,
if that's the case,
if that, I mean, it's a long trip to Mars. Number one.
That's what I mean. If we can make it to Mars, that will give us a lot of information.
Yeah. On
what it would take to go further. So that's why I choose Mars, not like the Moon, because the Moon's really close considering it's. Do you remember how many Earths it is away from Earth to Mars?
Wasn't it like 200? It was 235,000 somethings between. It was either. Yeah, no, I don't recall. I don't want to state it because I remember we were going over numbers and we never settled on.
But it's really far to the Moon, and the Moon is incredibly close.
Yes,
Mars is unimaginably far. If we could make it there, really, and make it back, we would have so much data that would give us so much information on getting to, Titan or getting to any number of other bodies out in the solar system.
Yes.
Where we could possibly, mine for materials that we could, cause different forms of fission or fusion for that matter.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems unreasonable to me all the claims he's making. They seem...
Well, let's get to the conclusion here and get to the part that really concerns me.
Oh, fantastic.
Which is, he goes through these 4 points in the paper, and, the thing about these 4 points is they really remind me of kind of the inverse Christian apologetics arguments for God.
Okay.
This is not why you believe that there are no aliens out there.
Right.
These are logical proofs that you came up with that
After the fact,
that aren't substantiated, that are just junk. And you're not considering, hey, there's billions and billions of stars, even in a galaxy. Maybe they just didn't see us, didn't catch us, ignored us. There's plenty. I mean, maybe they shot out from their planet and picked a direction. And one of the 15 billion different tiny compass points of directions that they could have picked didn't happen to be ours. Right. But based upon these 4 points that he brings up, he comes to 2 conclusions that are published in this primary source journal article that people read, cite, and use for things. Mm-hmm. Point number 1. Because of the findings of this paper, an extensive search for radio messages from other civilizations is probably a waste of time and money.
Unless, of course, they're waiting to get a response from our direction before they bother going all the way.
Sure.
I mean, it's a long trip. I would assume that if we got anything which seemed to be mechanical in origin, that would be the direction we would focus on. We'd go that way.
I would say.
Because there's at least a bet that we'll get something.
Mm-hmm. So that's point number 1. Again, people cite that. People use that to make decisions about funding for things like SETI, which we're going to talk about later. But, that's an important point. Number 2, in the long run, cultures descended directly from ours will probably occupy most of the habitable planets in our galaxy.
Well, that's arrogant.
Yeah.
Unless, of course, we get a Taliban-like resurgence of Christianity, which, dominates the globe and falls under... what he said already, that we become super religious and don't bother going off the planet, or we kill ourselves.
Yeah,
I mean, we could have thermonuclear war any day now. Israel could bomb Iran because Iran has nukes. Iran would fire them. Mm-hmm. North Korea gets nervous. They fire something at somebody. Who knows who? I mean, North Korea, you never know. China goes crazy.
Exciting.
India goes crazy. India goes crazy. So Pakistan goes crazy. Screw it. Russia, they're just nuking everybody at that point, and we're stuck just, nuking the rest.
Russia's nuking places just to make them warm.
Yep.
It's so damn cool.
We're nuking Siberia. Why? You're nuking your own country? We need better beaches.
Have you been to Siberia? It's very cold. Okay.
Carpet bomb Siberia.
But so, yeah, I mean, that's a really, really kind of interesting take on manifest destiny that he wraps up that whole paper with.
A lot of scientists who are of the old school of science fiction, your Asimov type thing, they really do believe, for a fact, deep down inside, we will colonize everything. We're going to grow. Period. There is no confusion. They seem so absolutely sure. It's a little scary when you read some of the science fiction they've got. The picture of the future that they've decided upon. It's in a lot of cases utopian in a horrible, horrible way.
Well, we're not. Agent Smith was not necessarily wrong in his little speech at the end of The Matrix there, because we're not going to reach an equilibrium with our surroundings. We're either going to become extinct or we're going to keep growing. I mean, those are really kind of our only options at this point. I mean, maybe something could happen that would allow us to reach an equilibrium between birth and death and resource management, and we would just continue living on Earth for the rest of our species' lifespan.
Well, that would necessitate our species dying out.
Yeah.
So, I mean, my problem with the equilibrium argument is that no species ever reaches equilibrium. They stay that way for a while. Your horseshoe crabs have still evolved. They've changed. Mm-hmm. Even though horseshoe crabs are almost identical to the prehistoric ancestor of the horseshoe crab, which is the horseshoe crab.
Yeah.
Sharks have been around for a long time. The crocodilians have been around for a long time. Basically the same form. They've still changed. They've still tried to get ahead in their environment, same way we do. We just have huge brains.
Yeah.
It's not that we haven't reached an equilibrium. It's that we're really smart. And we find ways around equilibriums faster than other species could. They had to evolve. Forget it. We don't evolve. We evolve nature. Evolve the environment.
Point being, though, that our choices really are either go extinct or colonize the galaxy. I mean, that's really what we're kind of left with.
I don't know. We could growing. What do we got? 6.5 billion people, 7 billion people.
Sure.
We expand and we contract. We could wipe out most of humanity, then grow up again, then wipe them out, and we could just keep going bigger, smaller, bigger, smaller for a very long time and reach almost an equilibrium of, expansion and contraction.
Right, but meanwhile, we keep evolving technology, and we will one day make a shot for Mars. We will one day make an attempt to put a base on the moon.
Newt is not entirely wrong.
We are going to spread, or else we're going to die. Most accurately, we're going to do both.
Well, yeah, we're going to spread, and we're going to die.
So,
what's the time frame? That's the question.
Yeah, that's the thing. If it takes 50 billion years, one day the sun's burning out. So, don't be scared about that, though. It's not happening anytime soon. So, all right. Well,
so scientists would have you believe.
Right. That was an explanation for the absence of extraterrestrials on Earth by Michael H. Hart from the National Center for Atmospheric Research. Okay. So moving on to things we are doing. We are talking about aliens today.
And we are not watching the Super Bowl.
We are not watching the Super Bowl.
So the Giants, the Patriots, I can't speak to either. I have not looked at Facebook. I don't know anything about this.
Yeah, I haven't even checked Facebook either. Although I'm sure if I did, I would have plenty of information.
You probably wouldn't even need to watch the game.
Yeah.
You'd have it all. I'm sure that people have commented on everything.
I'm sure somebody's winning and somebody's losing, or possibly they're tied, although probably not.
I actually assume not, but that's neither here. I'm not even Captain Sportsman, and I haven't watched the game all season since the Bills started losing. Mm-hmm. And you know what? I'm pretty confident I know who's going to win. So.
Really?
There's no, yeah.
Oh, who's going to win? Make your prediction on the air. I'm calling you out on the spot.
Okay, I think the Patriots are going to win.
Josh thinks the Patriots are going to win.
And I think they're going to beat the spread.
All right, somebody call in or post in the chat room that the Patriots are down by like 50, and it'll make me very happy. All right.
All right, moving on. Current events. Now, as Paul mentioned earlier in the show, we have recently got ourselves a copy of Open Minds UFO Hotspots. UFO News and Investigations. Fantastic magazine.
Oh, it's nice.
Articles about Tom DeLonge from Blink-182. It's got Sammy Hagar. It's got all sorts of neat, seemingly scholastic-ish type things. It's really fantastic.
It's shiny. It's very glossy.
It really is. It's nice. One of the articles in the this, I'm going to say magazine.
Sure.
Is White House responds to UFO/ET petitions. Anybody who's been paying attention knows that Obama is trying to seem like he's not putting up a big wall on things. So they're actually responding to questions or petitions, surveys, things like that going to the White House saying, hey, we want information on XYZ. So they're really trying to respond to everything. Even some of the, let's call them cranks, the cranks out there.
They just have legitimate questions. I'm just asking a question here.
Yep. So on November 5th, 2011, the White House says there are no alien visits and there is no cover-up of UFOs. I got this from Universe Today. It's quite amusing. Apparently, they've asked the questions that were asked of the White House were twofold. They were asked, first off, was it? Oh, yes. Immediately disclose the government's knowledge of and communications with extraterrestrial beings. So that's the first request. And second, the U.S. government if the U.S. government has any information that life exists off-world, so any non-terrestrial life forms. So first off, is it the X-Files? Are there men in black doing things, covering stuff up? Or do you know anything? Did you find any bacteria in that water on Mars? Or, and that face on Mars, there really was a face, right? Really? Come on. Really? Really? Really, please?
Well, yeah, they bombed it with nuclear bombs.
That's how they got rid of it.
Right.
But still, at some angles, when the light hits it, there's a face. Yeah, yes. We're not just pattern-seeking animals. No, really
no,
a face.
Not at all.
Apparently... No. The White House says that there is no alien conspiracy to cover up information, firstly. And secondly, they have no good evidence of life, that has not been publicized in the media and then debunked when the actual scientists got on and said, yeah, those conclusions aren't what we... That's like newspaper guys having conclusions about the facts. We have just the facts. We don't have all those conclusions. So, but I will say that Mr. Larson, who put the petition in initially, comments after receiving this total negation of acceptance of the fact that obviously there are aliens.
Yeah, and bear in mind, again, this is being published in, what's the name of the magazine?
Open Minds UFO Hotspots.
Yes.
He says, in response to the response, however, that doesn't mean the subject of life outside our planet isn't being discussed or explored. In fact, there are a number of projects working toward the goal of understanding if life can or does exist off Earth. And he gives examples like SETI, NASA's Kepler mission, the Mars Science Laboratory, and, whatever we'll find out when Newt gets his base on the moon.
Sure. Yeah.
President Newt.
He's actually listing off the reasonable scientific queries into, astronomy, cosmology, all the things that we're actually studying out there in the galaxy.
Right. Yeah, I'm not a crank. There are people actually studying this. They think I'm a crank, but I'm not a crank. So, Mr. Larson, you're a bit of a crank. But, that's neither here nor there. I say more power to you.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I know I read the article earlier in the week, and the UFO magazine did comment that they were annoyed that their question was answered by what they considered to be a low-level staffer.
Right. The Secretary of Defense did not get involved.
No, he did not.
So I think they were upset, but they were just brushed off.
Yeah. Okay, so we got someone from the White House, but not like anyone important from the White House.
Right. This poor guy has worked his whole life. He got himself a job at the White House. He's so proud. Now you're a schmo. Yeah. You're a schmo. That's a little insulting.
First off, someone gave him the memo, the questionnaire, and said, "Okay, you got to respond to this." No, you have to respond to it nicely.
Yeah. The Paradigm Research Group, one of the organizations, they said, as expected, it was written by a low-level staffer from the Office of Science and Technology Policy, research assistant Phil Larson. So, coincidentally,
yeah, I think they wanted it, directly from Barack Obama. There's no aliens. They didn't take me down to a secret bunker. Right after I was inaugurated, and, show me the alien body or anything like that.
Actually, according to some of the stuff I've been looking at, they haven't briefed presidents since Kennedy. Oh yeah, that's a little later. We'll catch up to that soon.
Okay, all right. Well, the article that I chose to highlight this week actually comes from the New York Times, and it's
the Times.
Yeah, it's a little bit more serious, and it brings up a question for Josh and I to kind of kick back and forth here. So apparently, the title of the article is Search for Aliens is on again, but the next quest is Finding Money. What this is referring to is the SETI program, which had gone black for about a year or so when they completely lost funding, specifically the Allen Telescope Array in California. Looks like they've got a number of different sources of funding, and they're back scanning the skies using this 42 telescope array to search for, signals out there that seem non-natural in origin. And it's a really expensive project, and it costs a lot of money to use these telescopes, to build these telescopes, to search these skies for these things. And, SETI has always been criticized since, about the 1960s when it started with the idea that, okay, so we're basically holding up a big microphone into space and just randomly pointing at places and listening and hoping to hear something. And the general criticism is, okay, even if we do hear something, well, then what? And, Josh, you mentioned earlier that, we'll probably focus all of our attention in that general direction.
We'll start pointing SETI up in that direction all the time. All the entire array just in that direction as often as possible in the hopes of getting something else. Ooh, if we get something long enough, can we decipher it? Yeah. Because we have, math, which seems fairly universal. Even if it was a base 8, somebody could figure that out. A base pi, somebody could figure that out.
Yeah.
So if we get enough information, we can figure something out.
But, it does, the article specifically is addressing, should we be spending the money on, number one, should government money, should taxpayer money be spent on this? Number two, corporations, private donations from individuals are, they can do whatever the heck they want with their money. But the question is this an adequate use of resources? I'm torn and on the fence about that, because it is really, really expensive. And if we do get a signal from space, it won't really have any sort of immediate benefit to mankind whatsoever. On the other hand, we really need to be doing stuff like this. I mean, we need to be looking at the stars. I have no other way to even state that.
Man has looked at the stars since the dawn of time. That's what we do.
Yeah,
they're up there. We get to study them. I mean, that's what we do. Is we look up there because that's the final frontier.
Yeah.
I mean, that's I mean, okay. I did very quickly pull up some numbers here. Let's see. It cost $2.5 million to run SETI for 1 year.
Okay.
$2.5 million.
Expensive, but in the grand scheme of things, not that
That's my
expensive.
point. 5 Tomahawk cruise missiles, $2.5 million. One Predator drone, $4.5 million. An entry-level Learjet. I don't know exactly what that is, but I'm assuming it's, a Learjet, which is on the lower end.
Sure, it's your first Learjet,
$12.9 million. One Apache attack helicopter. $18 million. And this is from Discover Magazine's. The article is it's under the column of bad astronomy. So anybody that knows bad astronomy will be on board with this because Paul and I are both fans. Citibank executive bonuses were $19.3 million
Okay.
the year this was written. All right? So,
So you're making the argument that the $2.5 million a year is
seriously, it's pennies by comparison to what we just blow.
It's true.
Think about
or blow up.
The Apache helicopter. We use it to get shot at.
Yeah.
We put it in a place where people will deliberately shoot at it.
This is true.
I mean, and that's again $18 million. I'm sorry. I'm not particularly shocked by the dollar amount there. $2.5 million doesn't seem like a lot.
No, it doesn't. And this is kind of in the same realm. Josh and I, a while ago, discussed manned space exploration and whether or not that should be something that we should be spending money on. And the conclusion that both of us kind of come to on that is this same one is like we have to. We can either just sit down here in feudal and tribal and religious and political wars killing each other, or we can try and advance things. Because like the argument that we were making earlier, it's either we keep growing or we die out. And
Yep.
we need to keep growing, and we need to learn more about the universe and exploring everything.
You know what happens if we get a signal and we can verify it and it's a non-natural signal? NASA gets money.
That is true.
It's an equation. I mean, boom, boom. Phil Plait is right. Phil Plait does bad astronomy. He is correct in that it is a drop in the bucket.
Yeah.
It's just easy as that. We get a signal that we can verify. We get money. Hell, we get money from everyone. If we can get a good signal, we get money back from the United Nations instead of just being the biggest contributor. We get money from Russia because they don't have a good economy, but they want to be part of the whole deal. Put a couple cosmonauts on there, they'll give us some cash for that. I mean, that's just the way it goes.
Yeah, maybe we'd actually have a vehicle to take astronauts into space if we got a signal from SETI. That would be a nice thing. So that's the article from the New York Times. SETI is up and running once again, and it is once again going to run out of money within the next year unless they can find additional sources of funding.
Yep.
All right, so we're going to continue in this theme of just talking about random things involving aliens and what Josh and I have found, but I just wanted to take a moment just to talk about something that I came across, I honestly think about 3:30 in the morning last night.
Okay.
Now, how I got to where I was, I don't want to even try to explain, but I somehow, through doing the Wikipedia dance, the YouTube dance, and whatever it was, wound up at a website which was arguing whether or not the Federation or, the Empire would dominate in a battle. Meaning, The Federation from Star Trek, and yes, I'm talking about this.
Okay.
The Federation from Star Trek. Could they take the Empire from Star Wars? Or would the Empire prevail if the Federation went to war versus the Empire? Mm-hmm. Now, here's the thing that I wanted to bitch about. I wound up on this website arguing from the technical manuals published by the Star Wars people and the Star Trek people. And they compared a Star Destroyer versus like an Enterprise class ship from
Federation class.
Federation class, sure. And from the technical manuals of these fictionalized ships, they said that the Star Destroyer's laser cannons fire a 1,000 gigawatt laser pulse, whereas the Federation ship only fires a 100 gigawatt pulse. And so, and many, many facts like that, as written down in these, fictionalized technical manuals, the person at the end of this website made the argument, therefore, Empire would win. And I was just seething with anger over this stupid thing that I don't care about. I love Star Trek. I love Star Wars. I think the people who bitch about one or the other are absolutely freaking ridiculous. But here's my problem. This is yet another example of you going to a source and looking at it. Somebody made that up. Somebody made, how about 1,000 gigawatts? That sounds like a big number. It doesn't mean anything. If you were doing an accurate comparison between the two laser blasts, for example, you would look at the amount of destruction done on screen with one laser blast versus the amount of destruction done on screen and another laser blast. Not say, well, the technical manual says 1,000 gigawatts, so therefore the Empire would win. This is like making the argument that the Bible is true because the Bible says it's true. It's all just a matter of looking at what's written down and assuming, well, somebody wrote it down. It wouldn't be false if somebody wrote it down. If somebody wrote it down, it must be true. Okay? And that is the reason why you come to the conclusion that Darth Vader would overtake Captain Picard, screw Captain Kirk, Captain Picard, or, any of the other people, because clearly the Empire, even though, probably the Empire would win because they actually built planets and called them Death Stars and things like that. But the argument that you're making is from technical manuals that have no independent veracity. This is what you do with your science fiction. This is what you do with your religion. This is what you do with your politics. This is not at all different from you looking at a picture on Facebook that somebody sent you of Barack Obama and Michelle Obama's left hand covering their heart during the Pledge of Allegiance and saying, oh, well, yep, clearly they're not American. They don't even know which hand to put over, and not even questioning whether or not that was photoshopped or whether or not it even exists or is real. This is what you need to question. You need to use your brain. For something like the Star Trek, Star Wars debate, you need to go, oh yeah, those are just made up numbers. And again, it doesn't matter. I don't care. I don't care if Star Wars wins or Star Trek wins. That's not my point. My point is, it's the same thinking that you do in this artificial realm that you do in reality. And that is what we need to stop.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. And I see you're pretty strong in that. And,
we have a question about that.
Okay.
All right. Let me just, Okay, Tony, you have a question.
Yeah, I actually got a comment. In that fictionalized situation, I think that the Star Trek would clearly win because they have better management and they're not gang pressing their employees into labor.
Well, that is a legitimate argument. If we were having the debate Star Wars versus Star Trek, that would be a legitimate argument. And it's the same argument with, how bad could dictatorial rule be? Most of the, this goes back to the problem I have with stuff like Star Wars is like, okay, the Emperor, Darth Vader, all those people. So once they get the universe, what are they going to do with it?
My guess is they're going to apply order. They're going to have what's that guy in Korea do? A lot of marching.
Yeah, a lot of marching.
A lot of marching. They seem to like marching.
We're getting a lot of static. Tony, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here. Why don't you cut it off?
Yeah,
I said what I needed to say.
Yeah, it's there seems to be some sort of explosion or tsunami going around in the background, but all right, we accept your point as valid, and we'll move on.
Okay.
All right, thanks so much.
Although I do have to say the Nazis did pretty well, and they were, clearly the
for 6
the foundation
years.
Well, only because they didn't have a long-term plan. They were very effective in the short-term plan. That's all I'm saying is that, the Nazis are clearly the evil empire, and, we're clearly the Federation. I mean, we won, but that was only because they fought everyone else first. If they would have fought us first, who could say? But that's neither here nor there. Neither here nor there.
So now that I've completely just, dropped all pretense of at least me, I haven't wrapped you up in this yet so much, but at least me not being a complete dork or geek or nerd or whatever it is.
I'm just going to, just to go back, you did have an argument with someone who will remain nameless in my presence about the different types of ships in Star Trek.
Yes, I believe this is true.
So much so that me and the fourth person sort of just wandered away while the two of you just went on and on for seriously like an hour and a half arguing about Star Trek ships. I'm like, Data was a robot. That's all I got. That's the extent. I like Star Trek, but y'all are crazy.
Well, here's the thing, though. I mean, here's the thing that you're not considering in that whole, you watching as a third person as that whole discussion took place. Mm-hmm. He was wrong. He was wrong.
Oh my God.
I'm just saying.
Yeah. Well, that's why you have to keep track of the 1,000 to 100 gigawatts. Is that what?
That was actually.
These are very important things to keep in mind because people will fight that battle.
Well, they will, and I think I've made my point, and it's an anti-Christian point. That's all I'm saying.
All right.
Okay, so let's move away from Star Trek and talk about aliens.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about some real-life alien experiences.
Sounds good to me.
I'm going to talk about then governor, but soon-to-be president, Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter, I don't know if anybody out there knows this, saw an alien ship. Yes, he did. Jimmy Carter reported a UFO sighting back in 1973. He went out from a boring, apparently, speech at the Lions Club, looked into the sky, and saw a great light that came toward him, went away.
Like a plane.
Came back, went away again, did this 4 or 5 times before it eventually went away. And he reported it and signed his name. And you can actually get a copy of the paperwork. And yes, the signatures match and the handwriting does match because it was handwritten. So this is not a lie. This is the truth. It was actually reported. Let's see. Carter's Weird Science. Somebody actually brought this up because apparently Jimmy Carter was crazy. But yes, most people consider now that Jimmy Carter probably saw the planet Venus, and if you stare at a light source in the sky too long, it will apparently appear to get bigger, then smaller, then bigger, then smaller. This happens fairly often. So like 25% of sightings of UFOs are on nights when Venus is very visible and usually in the direction that Venus is. So, but Jimmy Carter saw this and reported it back in 73. Let's see. It was self-luminous. There were 10 to 12 men who watched it happen. No one else has come forward to claim this.
Wait, no one else has come forward other than the 10 to 12 men? Or
no, other than Jimmy Carter.
Okay.
No one else who was there reported it, and when asked the people that they knew were there, because again, Lions Club meeting, they took roll. Mm-hmm. None of those people claimed to have seen it. Mm. Let's see, it was about 30 degrees above the horizon. He did not report this. He was not visited by men in black, so he claims.
Or so we know.
Right. He did not draw a picture of it, but he says it was just a self-illuminated ship, a self-illuminated object, I guess. It was unidentified and flying, so it was a UFO, at least as far as he was concerned. So this did happen. Now this leads us into the government and the aliens.
Oh, goody.
So way back, I'm not sure if anybody's familiar with Foo Fighters, and not the band, what they're named after. The supposedly what may or may not have been alien crafts during World War II. Well,
World War II, just to stop you and point out, really our kind of first time we had airplanes involved in battle.
Yeah, World War I, those things weren't really airplanes. They were some primitive thing.
And I'm sorry to stop you and interrupt, but I just wanted to point that out because, like, what we're talking about is the first time we went up in the air. Not like we've been going up in the air for years and years and years. World War II was kind of the first time we went up in the air. So,
well, afterwards, in 1948, what was and then would soon be the United States Air Force, because at the time of World War II, it was actually, for the most part of the Army. It wasn't its own branch of service. Began with what they called Project Sign, a U.S. government study of unidentified flying objects. Project Sign published a report in 1949 stating basically that they thought there were unidentified flying objects and there were probably aliens. This went on for quite some time. Eventually, Project Sign became Project Grudge. There was no
Project Grudge?
Yes, and there is some vague quotes by the people that renamed it, that there was a reason we renamed it. Project Sign and Project Grudge meant things.
Okay.
Nobody explains what they meant. Let's see. It was between the Department of Defense, the Directorate of Intelligence, the Pentagon, the whole thing. In a document dated July 10th of 1949, the Office of the Air Force Directorate of Intelligence at the Pentagon requested the assistance of other branches of the armed forces and the FBI in compiling data and determining how best to investigate flying saucers. Yes, flying saucers. So, now February 11th, 1949, an order was written that changed the name of the UFO project from Project Sign to Project Grudge. It was supposedly written because the classified name Project Sign had become public, therefore no longer classified.
Yeah.
So they had to rename it to something else, much like the movie directors that they name their movie while they're filming it something silly and bizarre, and then, before the real name comes out, because you got to keep these things secret. There apparently was some significance, but, so they went on, so Project Sign became Project Grudge. All right, now, in 1952, so just a couple years later, they began Project Blue Book. It was a revival of the original thing that was done. A termination order was given in 1969, so they actually went from 1952 to 1970 investigating UFOs. Their conclusions were that the UFOs were not a threat to national security.
That's good.
Right. There was no evidence submitted or discovered by the Air Force that sightings categorized as unidentified represented technological developments or principles beyond the range of modern scientific knowledge. And there was no evidence indicating that sightings categorized as unidentifiable were extraterrestrial. Now, by the time Project Blue Book ended, they had investigated 12,618 UFO reports. So, they did their research. They investigated a lot.
Well, Project Blue Book is anyone who grew up having, at least a cursory interest in stuff like this. I had the Time Life Mysteries of the Unknown books.
Oh, yeah.
And the one on aliens was pretty much entirely a discussion of Project Blue Book. Mm-hmm. And they looked at something like 12,000 different pictures taken, and for, 90% of them, they ruled them out as hoaxes or so on. There were a small number of pictures that they said they were unable to determine the origin. Mm-hmm. And this is what a lot of people still hang their hat on. But when you're looking at 12,000 pictures, you can't figure out every single one.
Well, the other problem is that none of them look alike.
Yeah.
So they're 12,000. Those are sightings. So when you look at the actual photographs or any evidence, none of it seems to match. So they would probably be, in contrast to your opening article, they would probably be all different sorts. So different species, different types of propulsion, different aliens. So hundreds of different aliens.
Yeah, everyone sees a different alien, basically.
Until they do a movie, then everybody sees that alien.
Yeah.
Because the aliens used to be green, then the aliens looked like us, so they were the little green men that they talked about. Mm. Then more popular the reports became the what they call the Aryan aliens. The ones that basically were 6'2" and blonde. And that went past pretty quickly, except among, the Nazis. But then it went on to the little green men, or little gray men, the grays as they call them, which are the most popular up until recently, and they've sort of fallen out of favor.
Yeah.
Not a lot of acid bleeding aliens with an extra mouth that comes out of their own mouth.
Not yet.
Not yet. Well, they didn't really seem like the kind that would pilot the ships.
Yeah.
So,
they weren't real thinkers.
No. According to the National Reconnaissance Office, a number of the reports could be explained by flights of formerly secret reconnaissance planes, the U-2 and the A-12. Mm-hmm. So most of them, and you'll notice that a lot of these are done out in the desert, out in the middle of nowhere, where really there's nothing around except for that military base. The one that you're not allowed to go anywhere near. There's that one nearby, but nothing else.
The military base where they may or may not be testing planes that are classified that have or have not been released to the public.
Right. So, they may also be testing surveillance equipment that they're going to be putting over other countries that they cannot admit float in the air. And, they've got these weird shapes. They go really slowly. They go strange directions because they're being, but that's neither here nor there. Now, at around the same time in 1952, the Central Intelligence Agency had the Robertson panel. There were apparently a ton around the mid-50s of reports of UFOs over Washington, D.C. Mm-hmm. So they called in the CIA on this one. The CIA, this was later declassified, the Robertson panel report, concluded that UFOs were not a direct threat to national security, but could pose an indirect threat by overwhelming standard military communications due to public interest in the subject. So the CIA said that whatever these things are, the worst that's going to happen is you're going to clog the switchboard, so we actually can't get, like, if the Ruskies, the Ruskies, like fly reconnaissance missions over us just to take a look and see what they should bomb. Yeah, we won't know that because you're busy telling us about all these other things.
Right. And, it's important to point out, too, specifically with this thing that happened in the 1950s over Washington, mm-hmm. what you're talking about is the absolute peak of the Red Scare. You're talking about the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Yep.
You're talking about Americans building bomb shelters in their backyards. Mm-hmm. You're talking about
hopefully below their backyards, but
the advent of the atomic age. The nuclear weapons were first used at the end of World War II, but now all of a sudden in the 50s there is this new technology to be afraid of. We don't mm-hmm. understand it. We have, stories that the Russians have nuclear bombs, and we have microwaves in our kitchens, and we mm-hmm. don't understand either one. And now we're just staring at the sky. And so, Washington, everyone's staring at the sky. And it's the worst panic of the Red Scare, and now we're seeing a bunch of aliens.
Right. Well, the Robertson panel concluded that 90% of UFO sightings could be readily identified with meteorological, astronomical, or natural phenomenon. And that little 10% of UFO reports that could in all likelihood might have been something real. The conclusion was that they were similarly explained. We just didn't have an explanation, mm-hmm. but we didn't have any other explanation. In fact, one of the things that we note is there were a couple of German scientists after World War II, because we got a lot of the German scientists. Mm-hmm. The Russians got some too. And a couple of them had actually worked really, really well, and we were really kind of afraid. That's actually the reason we took all the Nazi scientists, was the Russians had gotten some really good ones. And we were concerned that maybe they were actually, flying reconnaissance missions over us. So there were some documents released, again, under the Freedom of Information Act, that they were actually afraid that some of those UFOs mm-hmm. were actually, Russian reconnaissance missions, that they were flying over, taking pictures of us. So, again, the other 10% do have, a general explanation aside from the standard bright stars and planets, meteors, auroras, mirages, atmospheric temperature inversions, clouds. Let's see, what else do they have here? That's just a few examples.
I'm with you on everything except for atmospheric temperature inversions. That sounds like sciencey talk for aliens. I'm just saying.
Yeah, well, there also was what they call misinterpretation of conventional aircraft, water balloons, birds, flocks of birds, searchlights, kites, and other phenomena.
Did you say water balloons?
Weather balloons. Oh, I may have said water balloons.
You did say water balloons? I'm like, wait a minute.
No, weather balloons. I don't think the CIA thought that there were too many water balloons that far up in the sky, especially not ones that illuminated or reflected light from the moon reflected from the sun.
Well, somebody's got a good arm.
The panel also suggested the Air Force should begin debunking efforts to reduce, quote, public gullibility and demystify UFO reports, partly via public relations campaign using psychiatrists, astronomers, and associated celebrities to significantly reduce public interest in UFOs.
Yeah, that's not good.
Yeah, that comes out, but I mean, truth be told, that actually is a reasonable thing to do. It sounds bad, like they're trying to cover it up using psychiatrists and celebrities to say there's no aliens. It just seems like there is.
It just really gives fodder, though, is my problem.
But I mean, that's
with
actually what they should do. It's, again, to reduce public gullibility. It was also recommended that the mass media be used in the debunking, including influential media giants such as Walt Disney. The primary reasoning for this was a recommendation lay in the brief that the Soviets might try to mask an actual invasion of the USA by causing a wave of false UFO reports to swamp the Pentagon and other military agencies, thus temporarily blindsiding the U.S. government for a communist invasion. The national security agencies were instructed to take immediate steps to strip the unidentified flying objects of the special status they have been given and the aura of mystery they have unfortunately acquired. So the CIA actually did suggest, teaching people not to be stupid, and that will make the UFOs go away.
It's a thought.
In fact, after the report was released, in March 8th, 1969 issue of Nature magazine, they offered a fairly positive review of the... Nope, I'm jumping ahead. The next one we have coming up is the Condon Report.
Okay, I know not of this Condon Report.
The Condon Report is actually the University of Colorado. They decided that the government should stop investigating UFOs because it was making people think there was a government cover-up and a conspiracy.
Okay.
So the government gave $313,000 to the University of Colorado.
$313,000?
$313,000.
It's a very specific number.
Actually, it may have been $313 million. Hold on, but I believe it was $313,000. Yeah, $313,000 to the... Well, we know how much it was. I mean,
I don't know. It's just normally it's 25,000, 300,000.
It probably started out at 300,000, but these there are problems.
We gave $666,000
to the Institute to investigate the devil.
Yes.
Okay. The Condon Report, which actually wasn't a name, it was just a report by the University of Colorado UFO Project. They basically were given every single piece of evidence the government had and told, go find all the evidence you can and give us a neutral, impartial look at, what's going on. Mm-hmm. The final report said, and just to nutshell it, they said, the study of UFOs was unlikely to yield major scientific discoveries. Now, the Condon Report was what, in 1969, was reviewed by Nature, where they said that they gave a positive review, but they wondered why so much effort had been expended on such a subject. Quote, the Colorado Project is a monumental achievement, but one of perhaps misapplied ingenuity. It would doubtless be inapt to compare it with earlier centuries' attempts to calculate how many angels would balance on the point of a pin. It is more like taking a sledgehammer to crack a nut, except that the nuts would be quite immune to its impact. So,
A little pun there.
It was nice. It's fun. Well, nature, man, nature. And lastly, I just wanted to point out, and this is just your tax dollars at work, the Disclosure Project in 1992 went over all the alleged evidence of a UFO cover-up. It went through everything from UFO enthusiasts, all the declassified materials. By the way, virtually everything is declassified, and we actually have evidence of what can and cannot be declassified, so we have a really good idea of what is declassified, and we know all the levels of classification and declassification. So when things are not declassified, we actually know that they're not declassified, which is, kind of amusing. But they found all kinds of things, that they thought were suspicious, but again, came up with no positive results. Which just goes to say that we've spent millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars searching for UFOs and have not found them. And I opened up with Jimmy Carter, President of the United States, so he was elected by, more than half the electoral votes. But Jimmy Carter, 73, saw a UFO. If that's not good enough for you, if all these failed attempts by the government to turn up evidence of aliens has you down, there is one more ray of hope for the alien lover.
Okay.
Edgar Dean Mitchell, astronaut.
Oh, yes.
Yes, was on Apollo 14. He was actually on the backup team for Apollo 10. The oldest man to walk on the moon. So this guy, he's pretty badass.
He walked on the moon.
He walked on the moon. I mean, not a lot of guys have walked on the moon.
Drank Tang.
Yep, and he's the oldest guy to walk on the moon. So obviously the most mature and the most worldly at the time. So, I mean, his opinion's going to count for something. And he says there are aliens. He says there are definitely aliens.
He does the double declarative on that, huh?
Well, he says, and I quote, 90% sure that he is 90% sure that many of the thousands of unidentified flying objects or UFOs recorded since the 1940s belong to visitors from other planets. Astronaut.
Yeah.
All right. He also says that UFOs have been, quote, the subject of disinformation in order to deflect attention and create confusion so the truth doesn't come out. In 2004, he told the St. Petersburg Times that, quote, a cabal of insiders in the U.S. government were studying recovered alien bodies and that this group had stopped briefing U.S. presidents after John F. Kennedy. He also says, we all know that UFOs are real. Now the question is, where they come from. Yep, he claimed that the Roswell crash, that they were real aliens, they were recovered, they were hidden. He says, again, quote, I happen to have been privileged enough to be in on the fact that we've been visited on this planet and the UFO phenomenon is real. He goes on to say, NASA does not track UFOs. NASA is not involved in any sort of cover-up about alien life, all right? But the government is.
Oh. Yeah.
All right? Now, so, one more thing. July 25th, 2008.
Okay.
Interview on Fox News. He clarified his comments did not include NASA, but, quote, unnamed sources since deceased at Roswell who confided in him that the Roswell incident did involve an alien craft. So he spoke to the Roswell scientists that were doing those alien autopsies.
Oh, yeah.
So this is solid. Again, he got himself he's got a Bachelor of Science. He's got a master's degree. He was the oldest man to walk on the moon. He's an astronaut. I mean, this is a solid source. Other things that he is a proponent of. Consciousness and paranormal phenomenon. He did private ESP experiments with friends on Earth when he was on the moon. He participated in Savikalpa Samadhi experience.
Oh, okay.
And if you want to know what that is, I had to look it up. In the state of Savikalpa Samadhi.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just screwing that up.
Uh-huh.
The attention and the life force are switched off from the senses, and we are consciously kept identified with the ever-joyous spirit. In this state, the soul is related from the ego consciousness and becomes aware of spirit beyond creation. So he had an out-of-body experience of some sort.
That's nice. And he went to the moon.
Well, he had that out in space. Didn't say how his how his oxygen was working, didn't say how the pressure had affected him, none of that. But he did have that experience, so that's clearly supernatural. So he participated in psychic research. Let's see, he also was... he had cancer. He had kidney cancer. And he was remote healed.
Oh, remote healed,
Yes.
huh?
He said that while he had never had a biopsy, he had a sonogram and MRI that was consistent with renal carcinoma. And he was remote healed by a healer who lives in Vancouver, who worked on him from December 2003 until June 2004. And the irregularity he suffered was gone and has not been back since.
Okay, well,
so
I got a couple
the poster boy for the most qualified, I'm going to say, or the most, I guess, respected. And they bring him up all the time. You read anything about UFOs, they talk about him. He believes in remote healing. He had some sort of metaphysical Eastern philosophical experience in space. He tried to communicate with people on Earth psychically while on the moon. Yes, and he was remote healed of cancer that he had never been diagnosed with.
Yeah, it is a little bit off topic, but I really do need to. I can't just let the kidney just go.
Yeah.
Number one, you have two kidneys.
Mm-hmm.
So when you have a cancerous kidney, they tend to say, hey, you know what? Why don't we just take that one out? No big deal. They usually do that about a day after doing a biopsy, which they usually do about a day after MRI and CT results indicating that you may need to have a biopsy.
He never had the biopsy. And he was miraculously remote healed through magical power or psychic, supernatural, parapsychological. I'm not sure what the terminology. Just they threw the good mojo, and his kidney got better.
And like 6 months of that, either he completely just turned his back on Western medicine because no Western doctor would give him the 6 months to do that. And, screw you, we're taking out your kidney.
Yeah. Or at least doing a biopsy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or else the Western doctor said, we looked at your CT scans and those are benign cysts, and they'll probably they're probably like renal calculi that'll go away over time, and yeah.
So that's the best evidence that I could find because I've looked at photo after photo after photo, and they're all terrible photos. Oh, by the way, in case anyone's wondering, the advent of digital cameras and cameras in your phone, that sort of thing, has actually lowered the number of alien photographs. Photographs of spaceships have actually gone down in the last 15 years. Well, something which surprised Steven Spielberg.
This is easy enough to explain. Clearly, the aliens are monitoring where we are in terms of our technological development. And now that they know that
they're cagier.
Yeah.
That does make sense.
Yeah,
it does make sense.
How else can you explain it?
Well, they don't want to give us too much evidence, or we'll know for sure, and we won't follow them on faith.
Right.
That's why God stopped doing miracles. Because you don't want people to do that. They're obviously religious zealots. They're trying to convert us. So that's clearly the way they would do it.
That is actually contrary to the paper I was discussing earlier, saying that if they were religious zealots, they wouldn't come here in the first place.
Well, religious zealots. Like all the Mormons that go over and go see people and teach them all about Jesus coming to the New World. Yep. Well, I think the aliens are that kind. I think they're proselytizing.
That does make sense.
We sent signals up to them, and they sent, more spirits for God. And they sent their ships over here, and they're slowly working it in. I mean, Dianetics, man. Dianetics.
All right. Well, as Josh and I talked about in the beginning of this whole episode, it does seem that aliens are kind of falling by the wayside.
They really are. There's not a lot of good stuff out there.
And that's interesting to me because I'm curious what the next thing will be. Actually, I think I have a rough idea of what the next thing will be. I'm pretty sure it's quantum mechanics.
Well, no, I think the problem is, I think the space program was a big letdown for us.
Yeah.
I think that everybody got let down from the space program, and now we've decided to look at other things. You look at quantum mechanics, you look at Eastern medicine. They've been doing it for thousands of years in China, and their life expectancy was 40. So we should do what they did, and things like that. I mean, that's the direction we're going. Is we're going to look around here for a while. We'll get some sort of a way to tell that a planet out there has that probably is within the window where life would be, and you'll get money going back into NASA. That's just
But if you look at it, I mean, it has always been the case. Off of the edge of the map, beyond here be dragons. This is the haunted forest that nobody goes into.
Yeah.
There are trolls, there are monsters, there are witches, there are warlocks, and then as we dispelled all of those demons, we then our next opportunity was to look, we looked to the Bermuda Triangle,
Yep.
unexplained places like that, and then with the advent of the space age, we looked to outer space for aliens in the same way we looked for monsters every place else.
I got to tell you, I think space is coming back. It's big. It's gonna be there. We've been talking about God and spirits and stuff living up in the heavens for so long. I don't think the heavens are over. I think the heavens are a long-term. We'll find a new way to look at it. We'll find something else.
Well,
but I mean, it's a long-term fantasy we're going to have.
That may be the case. I do have to say, though, that the next unknown, the newest unknown, is this "what the bleep do we know" crap. This idea of, now here's a whole other area of things that we don't understand. We didn't understand space. Turns out,
There's not much going on there.
Yeah, not too much to understand. It's pretty much an empty, cold, dark
Space.
vacuum. So, but whatever the next thing is, we'll probably come around to aliens once again. And who knows? We'll probably find life on other planets on some day, and then things will get really interesting.
Oh, they'll get exciting. We'll, what are you going to do? We're nuking Titan.
Sure.
Sending nukes to random moons around the other planets there. All right. So now's the time of the show that we like to banter aggressively. So what have we got here today? We've got our argument today is going to be science fiction has served to help the advancement of the space program.
Yes.
All right. So Paul, would you like to be heads or tails?
Well, I would say that heads should be science fiction has served to help the advancement of the space program, and you take the coin.
I'm taking the coin.
Yep.
All right. Heads is pro.
Yep.
All right. And I've got con.
All right.
Con!
yes. I think that's your only thing that you need to state.
I'm there. Okay, so it has. How so?
Okay, well, I think it's pretty clear and straightforward. I mean, if you look back at science fiction as it has evolved, since the advent of science fiction in the 1800s and 1900s, a lot of the people who wound up becoming scientists, who wound up becoming, rocket scientists, the people working at NASA, all of those people kind of grew up in an environment of reading science fiction, of reading dime store sort of comic books about space travel and exploration and rockets and things like that. And all that science fiction serves to do is to instill a wonder about the science aspect of the science fiction. Now, of course, when you become an adult and you get to NASA and you become a rocket scientist or whatever, you do realize that it's not like how it was in the cartoons or in the comic books or things like that. But that childish wonder never really leaves you. And science fiction has done wonders to make children interested in science, make children interested in pursuing that as a career and learning about that and exploring that. And that has led us to, fill positions in the space program. That's why people became test pilots. That's why people became astronauts. That's why, how many test pilots have become test pilots because of Buck Rogers? I guarantee you that number is greater than zero. How many people working at NASA designing rockets, designing spaceships, all grew up on a diet of science fiction, whether it be Star Trek, whether it be magazines, even
arguing over who would win between the Federation and the Empire.
Exactly.
Sure. Sure. As we said earlier, the argument between the Federation and the Empire requires illogical thinking.
Right.
I believe that was you, sir, that said that.
Yes.
Now, that what you're saying is true. I mean, to a point. The problem is, like with any growing mythology, the mythology's better than reality. Well, I'll step back. There's a show, Stargate, where a couple of the other guys, I believe is the episode, they've got the nerds. They're not the Air Force guys that do all the cool stuff. They're these support staff that they're just out there looking at signals, waving around their equivalent of a tricorder. And, they get into this argument because one of the guys isn't a fan of Star Trek. And he's being mocked and berated. And the guy's like, how can you get into this without worshiping at the altar of Roddenberry? And do this whole thing. And that's probably when it occurred to me. Science fiction actually got too good. It's now disenchanting. It's like when they tell you that premarital sex is terrible and it's horrible, and then you do it, and it doesn't seem to be. It's actually kind of good. Oh, it was a lie. You people lied to me. And I think my problem with science fiction currently is I think people were expecting transporters. I think that the lie won. So yeah, science fiction got us to the moon.
Yep.
Science fiction also kept us from going back.
So
we didn't get, we were sold a bill of goods. Science fiction sold us a bill of goods. We found out, oh, science fiction's a lie. Screw NASA. Cut the funding. You know, I mean, science fiction at best during the Cold War was a tool to keep us ahead of the Soviets. But, you know, it was a metaphor for life. It wasn't really any different than the stories of the gods fighting. It's
your
really
position,
no different.
Your position here, if I am to just fully understand this, is that you think that science fiction is bad and hasn't helped to help the advancement of the space program because of what you garnered from watching an episode of a science fiction television show called Stargate.
Actually,
that is what you're
yes.
actually arguing.
Actually, no, that was in support of your position. I'm contradicting that, but to some degree, yes. The problem is that people are more enchanted with the fantasy. The fantasy has become better than the promise of a better tomorrow. And when the fantasy supersedes the promise of a better tomorrow, screw tomorrow. We'll take all our nerdy impulses and put them into comic books and computers. We'll take all our nerdy impulses and put them into virtual reality and, dare I say, quantum mechanics. We'll start forgetting about aliens because there are no aliens. We've become disenchanted. We've been sold a bill of goods, and it was a lie. And once we figured out it was a lie, we stopped giving a damn.
Okay, well, first off, you have absolutely no evidence to support your position. You have absolutely no evidence to say that the number of people who are serving to help the advancement of the space program has gone down with the increase in science fiction.
Actually, I do.
Number two.
Actually, I do, because the space program has gotten progressively smaller. It's gotten less funding by the general populace who pays taxes, who doesn't want their money going to NASA. The general populace, who are the people that need to care about space exploration, who were sold the bill of goods. You get a bunch of geeks, and the geeks, if they can't get into NASA, yeah, they're going to fight about who's better, the Enterprise or the Death Star. That's what they're going to argue about, because the real world has lost its flavor, it's lost its touch. They've been disenchanted. So we've moved into pseudo-reality as opposed to pre-science reality. So that's what happened. It's not just the scientists that need to be sold a bill of goods and have it come true. It's the general populace who pays taxes.
Your argument is that the general populace has been negatively affected by science fiction.
Yes, and the general populace is what promotes the scientific agenda, therefore science and scientific advancement.
Okay, well that's a completely fallacious argument. I mean, you can't. That's a.
How so, sir? How so?
You're trying to do this unitary action argument, saying that,
as were you, simply because technology advances at the same time that science fiction advances. People that are interested in technology will be interested in science fiction technology and real world technology. Therefore, will go into real world technology. Is the exact same unitary cause that I'm arguing the other side of.
I'm not saying
you're doing
there's
that.
a sole action. You're saying there's a sole action. You're saying science fiction propagation means less funding to NASA. I'm saying at least some of the people who go into the line of work that leads them to NASA enjoyed science fiction before they did so. You're saying that if there were no science fiction, more tax dollars would be going towards NASA, and because there is science fiction...
No. I'm saying if there were different science fiction. We're talking about science fiction as it exists.
Okay.
I'm talking about science fiction as it could exist. I'm talking, at best 2001, which was a fairly legitimate. I mean, they had the thing that spun around. They gave the artificial sense of gravity. They had all the limitations of space. You read the old science fiction novels; those actually show you what space would be like or could be like. The newer stuff will drama one out. Science fiction got too good at fiction, and we lost NASA. I blame Steven Spielberg. I blame Star Trek, especially The Next Generation. I blame all these things. They stole scientific advancement from us.
Well, that's an interesting qualitative argument that you're making about science fiction. I mean, if you want to argue that science fiction should be something other than what it is currently, that's fine, but that's not the position that refutes my position, which is that science fiction has served to help the advancement of the space program.
I'm saying science fiction has not. Science fiction may have caused a little blip that got us to the moon. That was the end of it. And altogether, science fiction has been a hindrance. It has not advanced.
Okay.
This little peak and trough, over the long term, not an advancement.
Well, I appreciate you conceding the entire argument because of the fact that you can substantiate that it actually...
I take one step forward, 2 steps back. That's going backwards, my friend. I concede nothing.
You conceded the entire argument by saying that science fiction did help us to get to the moon, and you cannot explicitly explain how science fiction has ever served to be a hindrance to the space program.
Science fiction became much more popular, and we lost funding to the space program because people expected teleporters, or dare I say, jetpacks. Mm-hmm. This was the expectation. This is the bill of goods we were sold. And you know what we got? We got nothing. And so we stopped funding NASA. Let's not fund SETI. Let's cut out everything that has to do with the stars. Let's get rid of it. Let's gut it.
They have
fight
no causative
day in
argument.
and day out. I'm saying you have no causative argument. I don't need to present one.
Yes, you do.
I'm disputing yours.
You're making a declarative.
Yours is a positive statement. I'm disputing yours. I need no causative argument.
Yes,
I need
you
to simply
do.
say that yours does not exist.
Your causative argument was that the better the science fiction got, the more we were likely to not fund.
You don't even know what my argument is.
That is what you argued. This is what you argued right here.
I don't believe that you were paying close enough attention.
Okay. All right. Well, yeah, that was a fun time. All right. Well, we want to know what you think. So email us at reason@wnyatheist.org. So what do you think, Josh? Has science fiction served to help the advancement of the space program?
I honestly do hold the position that I've got, but may have overstated it a little tiny bit.
Yeah.
But I actually believe that the recess on that point is the fact that we no longer had Soviets to fight. So that's really, it has nothing. It's neither. My argument, I think, exists, but is substantially weaker than I present.
Well, for me, science fiction is one of the ways you can use your brain. Mm-hmm. And I think using your brain's good. And I think a lot of people who do read science fiction do wind up going into the sciences. And we specifically try to, narrow the argument down to the space program. Mm-hmm.
Well, I actually would argue that was the case when science was when science fiction was sciencier, mm-hmm. and now it's not. I mean, everybody makes fun of dilithium crystals because they were kind of a win. Science fiction now seems to be fiction in the future. It's future fiction. It's not science fiction. And that is actually my biggest criticism of science fiction is Autobots.
Yeah.
Transformers are science fiction.
They're not, though. I mean, in the same way...
That's my problem, is that they're not, but they really are. That's what science fiction is becoming. It's becoming
That's what we're calling
movies.
Science fiction. And you're right. I mean, Star Wars is not science fiction.
But they never claimed to be. That's the joy. Is he did a lot of research. Lucas did with Joseph Campbell about the great mythological ideas. It was clearly mythology. I actually used to work with a guy, Roth. His name was Roth. Rath. His name was Rath. It was spelled like wrought iron.
Okay.
And people had a lot of trouble with his name. I don't actually remember what the final pronunciation was, but that's neither here nor there. He presented an argument to me, which I think is incredibly strong. Right after the prequel, the 3 Star Wars 1, 2, and 3 came out, we were talking about this, and his biggest criticism of it was that it was science fiction. The original trilogy, from Star Wars: A New Hope, through Return of the Jedi, was actually fantasy.
Yeah.
Once they tried to make it into really science fiction, they screwed it up because he wasn't good at making science fiction. He was better at making fantasy. They tried to explain the Force in, what were those things? Metachlorians. They tried to do all these things that stole the good spirit that Star Wars was a really, really futuristic fantasy.
Yeah.
Which was good,
All right. Well, I gotta say, aliens, Star Wars, Star Trek, a debate about NASA. I think this is our nerdiest episode yet.
Oh, yes.
It is a good time. And how apropos we're doing it in deference to the Super Bowl.
Indeed.
We're ignoring the Super Bowl to talk into our microphones about nerdy crap.
Yes. All right, Paul. So, well, until next time.
I guess that's that ends our episode of discussion of aliens. Next week we're going to be talking about evolution.
Yes, indeed. We're going to we're basically develop an argument over time that discusses the idea. I mean, it'll have some pros and cons. There'll be some things that weed out some of the bad arguments, and we'll have some stray tangents that become good arguments. It'll be a very evolutionary discussion of evolution.
Yeah, or we'll just talk about evolution. We may talk about intelligent design for a few moments. We may talk about Darwinism.
Darwinism.
It's such a dirty word.
It
Darwinism.
really is. It sounds bad. They've really won on that one.
Yeah, and we'll talk about, the idea of, since they're both theories, shouldn't we be teaching them both and letting the kids decide?
That's right. Teach the theory of gravity and the theory of, the four elements, earth, air, fire, and water. And the reason that we go down toward the earth is because we're part earth.
It does make sense.
And the reason fire goes up is because, it fires its nature to do, and it becomes
It's evident, it's intuitive.
It really is. It makes perfect sense. I think we need to go back to the four elements. Oh, and the humors, and the fact that Earth is on the back of a turtle. This will be great.
Yeah.
This will be fantastic. And astrology.
Well, astrology, this just makes sense.
Astrology, oh yeah.
So, all right. Well, thanks for staying with us to the bottom of another episode of Reason. We're 1 hour and 32 minutes, a little bit of a short one here. We were, didn't get as many callers, I fear, because of that whole sporting event thing going on.
Yep, yep.
But next week, evolution, and we'll be looking forward to hearing from you. So, until then, farewell.
Sayonara.